I think that the biggest disconnect between AI promises and delivery within media operations specifically that we see is just the dissemination of AI. As in, I think there's a quote that I really like, which is the future's already here. It's just not equally disseminated. And I think that's 100% true within organizations for AI. So when we talk to our customers, what they're talking a lot about is there's a huge spectrum of readiness and trust with AI. There's employees who are leaning in heavily and building tools, and there's other employees who just don't trust the tech at all and don't use it. And so one of the things that we've tried to do with Sigma is show the value of AI for employees inside of media workflows, simplifying their day to day so that they see the value immediately from AI, and put it in a sort of user-friendly interface that they can sort of take and use on a day-to-day basis. Good example of that, right, is, employees are used to, within programmatic, logging into different software for planning, for activation across different sort of ecosystems, for reporting. What we try to do is unify all that, put an AI lens on it, but really lead with the value. And I think what that's helped with is get those folks who are earlier on their journey with AI to start to trust and see the value so they can move down.
Turning to the seeing the value in AI, it's so easy to just be excited about the latest advances. We're so used to, some new innovation, but how do you avoid the shiny object syndrome that also comes with all these AI magical advances?
Yeah, I've talked about this a lot this week. It's really challenging, I found, to strike the right balance between sort of selling the vision, selling the dream, and then also being realistic about what AI can and can't do. Because the reality is, even when you're sort of selling ahead a little bit, the functionality might come out a month later, right? And so it's difficult as a practitioner to have a conversation around here's the skinny of what's real, and here's what tech can't do. We found that to be pretty important, actually, is being honest and upfront about here's the things that we do really well, right? So whether that's kind of media planning across different ecosystems, or connecting walled gardens with open web sort of together in one place, that stuff really works well, I think, with the tech that we've got today. It's not sort of a catch-all, right? And I think if you're coming in with the expectation that you can hit the easy button, all your campaigns run sort of end to end, and you never have to worry about it again, that I think you're setting yourself up to be disappointed.
No disappointment on any of this, but there are, when it comes to AI, the embrace of AI, it's pretty universal, but some areas, some client types are a bit more ahead. Mo, what are you seeing in terms of who's really pushing things forward more quickly?
Yeah, it's a good question. And actually, your premise I love, because I think you're right. Every company at this stage has some AI strategy or has an AI task force and is integrating it. The reality is, every time we talk to an agency, they're getting asked about AI in every client pitch at this point. And so they're having to respond to that by kind of leaning in. I think what I find really interesting is how companies of different sizes and types within the industry are leaning into AI. What we find is at the holding companies, the focus on AI task forces has really been around kind of customization on top of platforms. I think, one of the big things that we're seeing within DSP platforms, within some of the technology players, is they're building out AI interfaces that make buying and planning within their ecosystem easy. But how do you sort of up level that so that one piece of technology works across different ecosystems? There's a lot of customization that's sort of required there, right? And so that's one of the areas that we're focused on with holding companies, is how do we help them customize on top of the AI tech that platforms are building, and sort of build something that's universal across those. For smaller agencies, I think that connectivity starts to become a little bit more important, right? They're coming in with fewer resources, maybe fewer sort of headcount to tackle a big client problem. And so for them, it's really important that they can go to one place and do kind of planning and insights and intelligence across a wide spectrum of, media activity or platforms that they're being asked for by their clients. And so, for those customers, it's all, what we've seen anyway, is it's all about that connectivity piece. And then I think for brand direct, the interesting thing has been, what we tend to hear from brands is they want to get sort of closer to the decisioning inside of media themselves. And so I think we've seen that in the last 4 or 5 years with the in-housing trend with brands. I think with AI, the core focus that we have with brands is how do we get the data that you have, first party customer data that's super powerful, connect that as closely as we can into the programmatic ecosystem, and give you tools that very quickly help you create audiences or push activations or do setups or reporting, and ease that sort of insights to decision timeline.
AI has become pretty much commonplace in our work lives for the most part, but we're still in this moment of experimentation. So for you, is there any one AI driven workflow change that you think will become kind of pretty much table stakes at some point across the industry?
Yeah, I think overhyped, underhyped is maybe a good way to look at it, right? I think the overhyped for me is the sort of single chat interface that has, no other context, but you can type in. It's almost like a Google search, but in sort of chat form. The reason I think that's a little bit overhyped is because it doesn't give the user the right mix, the right balance of control and context. You have sort of a chat interface. Yes, you can sort of, you have a lot of control over what you type, but you still need the sort of, what's going on in the UI or what's going on in the sort of, the intelligence layer. And so what we've seen work really well, and I think this is maybe closer to correct on interface, is having on one end all your campaigns and insights, having the chatbot almost as an assistant next to it. So this is kind of a tactical point, but I do think this is that chat interface that everyone's going after is a little bit overhyped, and the future of AI is going to look a little bit different than that. I think what's underhyped right now is the ability for AI to connect across different ecosystems, especially, what traditionally we would have called walled gardens or closed ecosystems. And so the ability to sit one level on top and go, I can use the YouTube algorithm when I'm activating on YouTube, the Meta one on Meta, Trade Desk one on Trade Desk, but there's a unifying layer on top, which is all about campaign goals, objectives, best practices. That I think is actually going to be pretty important in the future.
AI also allows everyone to kind of have their own special sauce, and really the democratization has become such a big deal. But this is still an industry that depends on scale. So how do you balance the need for that customization that you've spoken about with this idea that the industry also needs AI standardization?
Yeah, it's a really good point, right? Because at the end of the day, you scale with standardization and you experiment with some of the cool shiny toys that we were talking about earlier. And I think that, one of the ways to think about the balance is we're seeing today a lot of individual AIs that are built for individual platforms, right? So like Kokai on the Trade Desk end, right? The Yahoo sort of AI tools, or every kind of DSP buying platform, even sell side platform now has some AI component. All of those are awesome. They integrate really well. And the reason they work is they're integrated directly into the bidders of those platforms. I think what agencies will start to lean in is how do you sort of use that in conjunction or in concert with sort of an AI that integrates agency data sets, right? And so that for me is all about, well, I've got this kind of unified planning layer on top that takes in first party data or takes in my data, and maybe the optimization that layer makes is the standardization, right? So that's all about like how do budgets get allocated across all of these different ecosystems. And then sure, I can use the performance max algorithm within the Google ecosystem, right? And that works well. So in a way, that's almost AIs managing AIs in the future. In the short run, though, I think what that means is all these tools need to start to build sort of interoperable APIs that buyers can use to plug into their own planning tools. The reality is, I think every agency will want their own sort of planning ecosystem in the long run. We think, Sigma is sort of interoperable in that way that it plugs into a lot of those ecosystems. But what that means downstream is platforms also need to develop APIs that sort of feed their AIs into the agency ecosystems.